Well, it looks like we're going live for another Relate Well Live with Dr. Rick Marks. That's right. It's Friday evening, and I'm hoping that you've had a wonderful day and a relaxing day. And I'm here in our studio to help you think through expectations. Now, we all have expectations, all right? We're going to kind of jump right into it, if you will. We all have expectations. I mean, we have expectations about life, we have expectations about ourselves, we have expectations about our employers, we have expectations about our children, we have expectations of ourselves as parents, we have expectations of ourselves as husbands and wives, we have expectations of our husbands and wives. We even have expectations about what marriage is supposed to be. We have expectations about how people in the church are supposed to treat you. We have expectations about how the government is supposed to be. We all have expectations. Having expectations is not good or bad. It just is. I mean, think about it. Hopefully couples expect fidelity in marriage, right? We would hope that both couples would expect fidelity. We would hope that both couples would expect to be treated in loving ways. We would think that you would hope that your boss would be respectful to you. We expect that when you do work, you get paid for that work. We also have expectations about how the places you shop at or how they're supposed to be, right? Those kind of things. So expectations is not a bad thing. The problem comes when expectations start to clash. There's that saying in life about there's things you know. There's things you know you don't know. And there's things you don't know that you don't know. I mean, what are some things you know that you know? Like, I know that I know I'm here talking to you right now. I know that I'm married to Luella 37 years. I know that I turned 60 October 3rd of this year, 2021. That's right. I'm headed into a new decade. And I have expectations about what that decade is going to look like for me, all right? And so there's all these expectations that we have, right? There's things that I know that I know. There are expectations that I know I have. There's also things in the realm of knowledge you don't know. Like, I know that I don't know quantum physics. I know that I don't know who's watching me right now. I know that I don't know what my daughter and my son in where they live are doing right now. I know that I don't know what's happening in the Amazon right now, you see. So there's a realm of knowledge, things you know, and then there's the realm of knowledge, things you don't know. And your brain only functions from the realm of what it knows and what it doesn't know, because your brain knows what it knows and knows what it doesn't know. And if you think about it, your realm of knowledge is very, very minute. I mean, if you take all the knowledge that exists in the world, right, and compare it to your realm of knowledge, if it was a circle, you'd have like a pinprick in that circle of how much knowledge you possess based on all of that knowledge that exists in the world. But within that knowledge of the knowledge that exists in the world, there's things you know, you don't know. And there's this massive area outside of that pinprick. You see, in the pinprick, which is the things that you know, right? Your realm of knowledge. In your realm of knowledge are the things you know, and know you don't know. Now, here's the thing, though. That massive area outside that pinprick in that circle are the things you don't know that you don't know. And what are the things you don't know you don't know? You don't know. You just don't know. An example is before you ever heard my name, saw my name, or saw me, you did not know that you did not know me, you see. I learned in my early years of marriage, as I was growing and maturing, there are things about me that I did not know that I did not know. What are the things you don't know you don't know? You just don't know. They're not in your realm of knowledge yet. In other words, before you ever heard my name, saw me, you did not know you did not know me. And the reason you did not know that you did not know me is because you had no knowledge of me. Now, we're doing a lot of things to advance Relate Well and the culture at large across the country and the world to help people learn, develop healthy, mature relationship skills. But before you probably saw one of my clips, right, talking about what we talk about, healthy relationships, healthy marriages, you probably didn't know you didn't know me till you saw me. And after you saw me and maybe liked what I had to say, which is why you continue to watch some more. You could say now that you know you don't know me, but before that moment you saw me, you didn't know you didn't know me. You know what I learned? I learned that there are things about me that I did not know that I did not know. Now, there are things about me that I did not know that I did not know that my wife knew. She saw those things in me. There are things in Luella that she did not know that she did not know, but I knew. I saw them in her. And there's another realm of knowledge of things that there's another area of things you don't know. A lot of people don't know they don't know. They have unconscious, listen, they have unconscious expectations that play themselves out in the present that get in the way of developing healthy, intimate, loving, mature relationships. And what we have to be attuned to in life, if you want a healthy, happy marriage, and particularly if you want a fight-free marriage, you're going to become aware of what those expectations are, the ones you know, and you'll have to get clarity around some of the things you don't know, which means you're going to be teachable. You see, you're going to be teachable. My mentor, who I always refer to, Lori Gordon, I was talking about something going on with Luella and me once, and she said to me, listen to what she said. She said, "You want to know why Luella and you can't solve that problem?" And I said, "I know why." She said, "Why?" And I said, "Well, because she's not a good communicator. Arrogant, right?" But I was teachable. And Lori said something to me that I've never forgot. She always gave me a lot of nuggets of wisdom that really helped me. And this was one of them. She said, "Rick, there is something about this issue for Luella that you don't know yet. And because you don't know what that issue is about that issue, you can't solve it yet. Because you need to learn what that thing is. You have to listen better." Novel idea that the reason we were still struggling is there was something about the issue for Luella that I did not know yet. And because I did not know it, we couldn't deal with it. We couldn't actually deal with it in a healthy way. And because we couldn't deal with it in a healthy way, because I didn't know what that thing was, what Lori was suggesting is, why don't you spend more time listening to her, asking questions, and you might learn something you didn't know about that issue for Luella. And once you learn what that is, which is a piece of the puzzle for a possible solution. You know what I found out in life? Lori was absolutely right. There are things that I didn't know about my wife. There were things that I did not know because she's never shared them. There are things that I did not know about me because I was unaware of those things. They're unconscious to me, but I could not share those with her. But here's the catch. Ready? Here's the real catch. Even though there were things in me that I did not know about me and my expectations about life and love, et cetera, I couldn't share them because I was unconscious to those expectations. Yes, it is possible some of your expectations are actually unconscious to you. They're not in your conscious awareness. But where do these expectations about life and love and relationships come from? They come from your history, from child rearing, from things that happened to you, from culture, from your religion, your faith background. They come from maybe the things that you learn at whatever country you're from. You see, Americans have an expectation they'll be free. They have an expectation that they can speak up and say what they want to say, freedom of speech. Okay, we have expectations of freedom of the press. Or those are expectations just kind of ingrained in us from the day we're born because we live in this country. All right. We also have expectations that come from your experience in life. Example, now I grew up in a broken home. I did not grow up in a healthy home. I grew up in a home where, looking back at it, I could tell you my dad loved me. I really don't know if my stepmother did, for me. All right, that's just for me. All I know is I would never measure up. That was the message I always got from her, is I'd never measure up. She was always critical. And I never really thought or believed that I would ever matter. However, because I grew up in that dysfunction, divorced home, parental alienation syndrome, all of that going on, I had an expectation about relationships. And here it is. It was unconscious to me. I didn't learn it until I was in my early 40s. It was unconscious to me. I had an expectation that if you get close to someone, they're going to walk away from you. Did you get that? I had expectations that people are not loyal to relationships and that people will always find something wrong with you and they're always going to walk away from you. Unconsciously, I had an expectation my wife wouldn't stay in the marriage. Unconsciously, I had expectations that if you get close to someone, they're going to walk away. Sadly, I've actually had family members in my own life shut me out of their life. I've come to learn that was more about them than me. But in those early days of my life, if that happened, I would have assumed it was about me, but also I assumed that's how life is. Why? That's what I always knew. Always knew that I would never be good enough and I would never measure up. Why? That's what I was always told. And I bought into that belief system that I wasn't good enough. I didn't matter. I wasn't lovable enough. I didn't have a lot of value. And out of that, I had expectations about how people were going to treat me, how people saw me, how people perceived me. It also set the platform for how I perceived others, how I understood others, how I connected or didn't connect to others. It also affected my ability to produce or think that I was good at producing, or I became an overachiever. So I had a PhD and 2 master's degrees, a BA, an LPC, an LMFT, clinical member of the AAMFT, ordained minister, REV, CIA, UFO, EIEIO, right? A lot of letters. However, the real reason that I was performing was because I didn't believe I was still good enough. And that was just an expectation that I placed on myself. You'll never be good enough. It was a belief system I had. It was, I call it a story. It was a story in my soul that says you're not good enough. And because of that, flowed expectations that people would think I wasn't good enough, that people would walk away. See, expectations come from your history. They come from your history. I had one that I always thought was imposed on me. It never verbally, but kind of non-verbally, that if I was ever to go into the military, I had to be a Marine. I come from a long line of Marines. And there was always that expectation, if you're going to go, you're going to the Marine Corps. And I did, and I went in the Navy. And I'm so glad I went in the Navy. But that's back in the days in my late teens where I was trying to break out of fear and insecurity to become my own person. You see, part of the help in that area of my life was that I had, by this time, come to faith. And because I'd come to the Christian faith and I started to follow God and his teachings, one of the things I'm learning in the scripture is you got to speak up for yourself. Speak your truth. Just do it in a loving way. Be your own person. I had never been that kind of person before. I was always afraid to be my own person. I was a chameleon. Did you get that? When I was in high school, I was a chameleon. I could hang out with the ROTC folks. I could hang out with the jocks. I could hang out with the funny people. I could hang out at the smoke hole where all the smokers and potheads were. I could hang out with all of them. The problem is I didn't know who I was. I didn't really know who I was. And girls didn't really want to date me back in those days. And I always thought there was something wrong with me, you see. And so you take all of that hurt, you take all that shame from your childhood and the things that you learn in school, the things that the way people treat you, the way certain girls treated you when you're early in your life, and all of that shapes expectations about oneself and expectations about how life and relationships are actually going to be. And here's the problem. Most people don't know they don't know. Unconsciously, we have these expectations that we impose on other people. Example, I grew up in a broken home. I had expectations that when I got married, I would have a wife who would love me unconditionally, who would accept me the way that I was. I had expectations that when I got married, that Luella would be an encouragement and a support to me. I had expectations that when I got married, that my wife, who happens to be Llewellyn, that she would want me to chase my dreams and support me in chasing those dreams. Also had expectations that I would be able to grow in my faith the way I needed to grow. And that even though I had these expectations that I could grow in my faith, I also had expectations about the level of affection I was going to get, the level of attention I was going to get, the level of appreciation I was going to get, the level of respect that I was going to get. And guess what? Had all these expectations about what my marriage was going to be. And then I married my wife, who I did love and do love. However, she came from a broken home too. And because we were both pretty immature, I was an emotional child back in those days. Because I wasn't a healthy, mature adult, folks, what I didn't know is I married a lady who had her own baggage and her own hurt, and she had expectations as well. You see, one of her expectations about her husband was he was going to be a Christian man the way her church defined a Christian man. And if you don't meet that little box description, well, then you're not a good Christian man. You're a failure to her. You're weak. And she had expectations that I was supposed to be a certain way. And since I wasn't fitting into her way of being, she tried to change me, control me, fix me, which only made me resist that. Because I didn't want to be that. I wasn't raised in the evangelical church like she was. And I didn't have all of that, I call it legalistic baggage, you see. But there were expectations she had about what I was supposed to be as a spiritual leader, what I was supposed to be as a husband, what she had expectations about the level of affection, which was very different than mine. I'm looking for someone who's very affectionate and touchy and wants to hold my hand and puts her arm around me. And I found out that you'll learn this and relate well, by the way. We talk about the core needs, and affection is one of those 10 core relational needs that are hardwired into the emotional brain. It's her lowest need. Folks, if Luella holds my hand, I get aroused. Man, I was like, yeah. If I hold her hand, it means nothing. You with me? Because we're different that way. But it was one of my higher relational needs. And because of that, she wasn't very affectionate. I would reach over and hold her hand like at church or somewhere, and she'd pull her hand away. Ooh. You know what that did? That just broke my expectation. Why? You're supposed to want to hold my hand. My wife is supposed to want touch and connection like that. And mine didn't. And guess what? My expectations were no longer being met regarding the need for affection. So what would I do? I would then begin to punish her with silence for not living up to my expectations of meeting my need the way I wanted when I wanted it. I'm not justifying what I'm saying here, right? Remember, I told you I was emotionally immature back in those days, and I never grew up in a healthy home, and Luell did not. So we never saw healthy relationships. It was never modeled, okay? All we saw were broken marriages. That's what we saw. And so we have these expectations, and now my expectations are not being met. They're not being met. What does that do? Am I mature to go communicate about that? No, not this guy. I'm immature. I'm emotionally a child. So what do? Sulk, whine, complain, go silent for 2 or 3 hours to punish her, make her feel guilty for not holding my hand, meaning for affection, or being appreciative. You see, these hopes that I had now became fears. Did you get that? These hopes that I had now became fear. The very things that I was hoping I would get from you, I'm not. And I'm afraid I'll never get them now. The very things that I was anticipating would happen in marriage isn't happening. And now I'm afraid it'll never happen. And that began to disconnect me from her over time. You see, we would start to grow apart, or we would start to fight. Now, we talk about having a fight-free marriage and relate well, and I believe that. I'm married 37 years, all right? Right now, 37 and a half, be 38 in February of next year. So 37 and a half years of marriage. I would tell you that Luell and I don't fight anymore. Having conflict and disagreements in life is normal. How you handle conflict and disagreements is the issue. We don't fight anymore. Why would I? Why would I want to hurt us? Why would I want to hurt our relationship? Why would I want to hurt her? I love this lady. So what we have learned is we're in that wonderful, smooth play, that rhythm that we don't fight anymore. When you're fighting, it's two people trying to win, trying to get their way, get their expectations met at the expense of the other person's expectations. And we would fight. But we are more Cold War. Got it? It was more of a Cold War. We would rarely, if ever, go hot. We were Cold War type people. Stonewalling, silence, little blurbs here, little blurbs there. Then I just shut down, walk away. I'm not proud of it. It was the best I had based on the way I was raised. And I didn't know how to express my expectations and the hurts for them not being met. In Relate Well, chapter 1, we talk about the wheel of knowledge. And right after that, we talk about the role of expectations. And that there is expectations that we have in our marriage that we bring with us from our childhood that are unconscious to you. You don't know that you don't know you have an expectation. It's like my mentor said to me, conflict is typically when you bump up against another person's expectation about something that you did not know they had. I'm going to say that again. My mentor taught me that conflict is when you bump up against another person's expectation about something that you did not know that they had. In other words, you're going along life, right? We're sailing along, and I say something, she says something, we're doing well, and something happens, and we're in a conflict right away, right? Why? It's because whatever happened triggered one of our expectations about something. And a lot of times the expectations get triggered are unconscious to us. So you bumped up against someone's expectations. And in chapter 1 of Relate Well, our curriculum, we have a statement there where I quoted myself in the book, actually, in the manual. And this is a statement. Your level of frustration is equal to your level of expectation. That your level of frustration is equal to your level of expectation. If your expectation about something's low, you're not triggered as much. But if your expectation something is high and it doesn't get met, your trigger is going to be high. Not necessarily in a hot war, but it could be in a cold war. Why? Because there's deep emotional meaning around that expectation for you. And because there's deep emotional meaning attached to that expectation, you get defensive, you double down, you fight for it. The problem is when you're fighting to force something, you're also fighting against your partner. When you fight for what you want, you're fighting against the very person you love, and therein lies the problem. To fight for what you want is to fight against the person you love. Because in that moment you fight for what you want, and you're fighting against your partner, you have zero consideration for what their expectations are, what their needs are, what their perspective happens to be. No empathy for their thoughts and feelings or perspectives. Because at that point, it's all about me getting what I want at the expense of my partner and us. And therein lies the real problem, is that when you're arguing to fight for your expectations, you're actually fighting against your partner, but more importantly, you're not just destroying them, you're destroying the relationship, the sense of usness. And this is the problem with expectations. Non-verbalized or unconscious expectations that have not been brought out into the open and have conversation around are destructive to relationships. In other words, what is a healthy expectation? I'll tell you. Let me say it this way. What is a healthy expectation for a marriage? Here's the answer to that. What is a healthy expectation for a marriage? Here's the answer. You ready? Are you listening? Here it is. The expectations that are healthy for a marriage are the ones you both agree to. Are the ones you both agree to. We both agree to fidelity. We both agree to mutual respect. We both agree to hug and to do those kind of things. Now, she didn't agree to do it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the way I wanted it done. Got it make sense? We have to negotiate how it looks. But the only healthy expectation in a relationship are the ones you both agree to. Outside of that, what I learned are the expectations you have are your expectations from your past. They're my expectations from my past. And that's all they are. They've not been shared, they've not been discussed, and they've not been agreed upon by the relationship, by us. By us. And therein lies the problem with expectations. We bring with us our history. Our history is in those expectations because expectations come from our history. We bring those with us into the present. Some are unconscious, some are conscious. And those unconscious ones in particular get us into trouble because you unconsciously have expectations about how something's supposed to be. You just don't know you have that expectation until your partner crosses it. Did you get that? You don't know you have that expectation until your partner crosses that expectation, and now you know. In conflict, you're really going to have to work on discussing the expectations you both have bumped up against. Hear each other's expectations, and this is important. Communicate about where did that expectation come from? What would that do for you? Where did you learn this? What would it mean if you got that expectation? What would it be like for you if you didn't have that expectation? And then you've got to listen to your partner's conversation about their expectation, where they got it from, and what would it mean if they didn't get it, and what would happen if it did happen. And then you can have a conversation about, well, what would those two things look like for us? For us. This is a silly one, but give you an example. My first year of marriage, still in the Navy, and Christmas Eve, I sat down at the base of the Christmas tree at our house, and I grabbed the present and started opening it. Luella saw that. I just did it. Luella saw this. She said, "What are you doing?" And I thought to myself, it's pretty obvious I'm opening a picture. But, I'm smart enough back at age 23 there. I said, "Well, I'm opening a present." "Why would you do that?" I said, "Because you open presents on Christmas Eve." "Where'd you learn that?" "Well, we did." See, by the time I left high school, we were opening our presents on Christmas Eve, so we'd sleep in the next day. And I just kind of liked that and carried it over. But here's the problem. I never verbalized it. I just did it because it's what we did. And she said, "Well, you don't open presents until Christmas morning." And I said, "Not where I come from." There it is. You see it? Two expectations about how Christmas was going to be. And now they're different. So once we recognize we have a difference there, we had to negotiate something that worked for us. And the agreement was, I can open one present. I will open one present on Christmas Eve, and I'll leave the rest alone. And guess what? When we started having children, I threw that out the door. We only did it on Christmas Day because I wasn't doing it for me anymore. I was doing it for my family and us and my kids. You see, but we had to negotiate early on. This is the power of living life healthy and mature, is understanding that your expectations will get in the way of your ability to love. It will get in your ability to be intimate. It gets in the way of your ability to communicate. It gets in the way of your ability to solve problems. It gets in the way of your ability to connect. It gets in the way of your ability to hear your partner's thoughts and feelings and perspective. Why? Because usually attached to those expectations are thoughts and feelings about those things. Remember what I said earlier, the level of frustration you experience, all right, is equal to the level of that expectation. And if there's a lot of emotional energy and a lot of a belief and strong belief around that thing, then your reactions emotionally are going to be strong. You're less likely to be movable. You're going to stay in your fort. No, I'm right. You're wrong. When actually it's just two competing expectations that come from your past. Listen, we can have expectations around fidelity in marriage, right? We can have expectations about being cordial and kind to each other. We can have those kinds of expectations in marriage. Those are healthy and mature. But a lot of this other stuff we go through, I'm telling you, have a conversation about it. Find an expectation you both agree on around that thing so that you can have harmony from that day forward around that expectation. Something that we both agreed to. Starting new traditions and new rituals for your family, you see. And here's what I've learned. If we understand that a lot of the conflict we have is because you're bumping up against someone's expectations about how something's supposed to be, and you're sending the message, I don't care, you're going to be in conflict. I can care about the expectations that Lola brought with her. That doesn't even have to agree with her, and it doesn't even have to do those things. It really doesn't. And here's the other thing. When you're imposing your expectations on your partner, that is highly disrespectful. It is highly disrespectful. I go back to Luella imposing on me that I was supposed to be this boxed form of Christian husband. Wasn't going to do it, never was, never going to be. You see, but she had been, I like to use the term brainwashed, to believe if you're a good Christian, you got to look like this. I didn't look like that. Thus, I didn't fit. It's very black and white. And it was a real problem in our marriage early on. She also had expectations about certain other things about how I was supposed to be. In other words, I was supposed to be like her father, a handyman. I mean, she used to convince me I could do plumbing. And then when I believed in myself, because she was believing me, and then I go mess it up and cause $300 worth of damage and I have to call a plumber anyways, I finally said, look, I know that you hope that I was like your dad. I'm not like your dad, right? Your dad was a handyman to do all that. But your dad couldn't help someone who's schizophrenic or a drug addict, right? That's my job. That's what I do. I'm not like him, but I am like me. I must be me. And there are a lot of people who are highly skilled as plumbers. We're going to use them in the future. Got it? And she had to give up that expectation that I'll ever be that kind of handyman. Not going to do it. Just can't. It's not my skill set. And that's one of the great things about living in the real world. What's really great about that is you don't have to be something you're not now. I can just be me. You see, when you have expectations about how your kids are supposed to be, and this is one of the things that you actually see sometimes in certain faith communities, they impose a religious teaching on their children and how their children are supposed to be, right? Because if they're not that, they're not good Christian kids, whatever that means. I have no idea. And actually, the beliefs that were imposed were inaccurate anyways. Nobody actually checks out whether their expectations are really valid in life and time, number one. Sometimes expectations are false. They come out of trauma. They come out. Remember I told you earlier in our talk, I expected people to leave. I believe that loyalty doesn't matter to people anymore in this country. You know what I found out in reality? Loyalty does matter to people. Not just the people I was around. But loyalty does matter. Security does matter. Having a secure, healthy relationship does matter. But when your expectations are such that you can't expect people to love you, etc., you have to question those. You'll find out that a lot of our expectations come from false beliefs about ourselves false assumptions we make about ourselves, assumptions we make about the world as if it's true, when in reality, we're not able to see the bigger picture in front of us. It may be true in this area, but it's not true all over. And that's maturity, and that's healing. And so those are some thoughts that I want to give you today about expectations and marriage. You see, Luella didn't expect to marry a Navy guy. She did. She did. She didn't expect to be a Navy wife, and she was for a period of time. You know, folks, if you're going to grow, if you're going to mature and be the best spouse you can be aware of your expectations, and also be aware you have unconscious ones, but you won't know about them until your spouse bumps up against them. Go have a great weekend. Be blessed. Thanks for listening. I'm Dr. Rick Marks with Relate Well.